Today we step into one of the oldest and most profound teachings in history, the ritual of initiatic death. In ancient schools, experiencing a conscious death was the beginning of a spiritual transformation. These rituals involve much more than physical death. They involve the shedding of one's old identity, the liberation from desires and fears. So what does it mean to die before you die? How do these rituals signify a change in one's inner journey? Let us begin to delve deeper into this ancient teaching. The doctrine of initiatory death was a rite of passage for spiritual maturation in ancient schools. Initiates would go through a specific experience of death in order to transform not only their body, but also their soul. This death is a state of abandoning worldview, identity, and worldly desires. But this was not just a teaching, it was also a process. This process was aimed at helping the disciples attain divine wisdom and a higher level of consciousness. Ancient schools, especially in Egypt, Greece, and India, formed the basic building blocks of initiation rituals. For example, in Egyptian temples, a priest and his disciple would participate in various symbolic rituals within the framework of the doctrine of die before you die, and try to unite with God's consciousness by purifying their personal identities. In ancient Egypt, especially under the influence of the cult of Osiris and Hermetic teachings, initiation rituals intensified. In Egyptian temple schools, students would embark on an experience in which consciousness had to be killed in order to be spiritually reborn. During this ritual, the physical body of the student is sealed in the dark chambers of the temples. Communication with the outside world is cut off, and only an inner journey begins. This journey meant that the disciple was cleansed of his or her identity, past experiences, and worldly desires. The story of Osiris's death and rebirth is the basic symbol of these rituals. Osiris's rebirth after his death symbolized the spiritual death and rebirth of the initiates. The priests in Egypt conveyed these rituals, symbolic meanings, and esoteric knowledge to their students, leading them to a higher consciousness. In the Hermetic school, wisdom was based on spiritual death, gained through the experience of death before physical and mental death. The Hermetic principles were based on the understanding of as above, so below, and spiritual death was the inner realization of these principles. Alchemy is one of the most ancient teachings used in ancient schools as a means of spiritual transformation. Alchemists in Egypt and Greece sought not only metal or material transformation, but also spiritual transformation. Alchemy can be defined as finding the gold in the essence, but this gold was symbolic of an inner transformation, not an external substance. The alchemists aimed to bring out the divine essence, spiritus mundi, at the core of the person, balancing male and female. This process was sometimes intertwined with the teaching of die before you die. For alchemists, the idea of bodily death meant shedding the old self. As students added different substances to ores to make gold, they went through a mental process of material purification to realize their inner death. The Hermetic schools of alchemy in particular taught death and rebirth, bridging the physical and spiritual worlds. The teachings of Hermes Trismegistus emphasize that in order to transcend personal identities, desires, and fears, one must experience true death. In mystical teachings, mental dissociation refers to the process of letting go of one's personal identity and merging with the universal self. In mystical journeys, one consciously undergoes mental death. This process was especially present in the teachings of the Greek mystics, the Gnostics, and the Kabbalah. In these teachings, physical death was only a symbol. The real death was the abandonment of one's thoughts and desires. Schools such as Orphism in Greece struck a balance between life and death, urging their disciples not only to abandon physicality, but also to undergo the death of their worldview and inner self. At the end of the inner dissociation, an initiate realizes that he or she is only a part of the universe. Today, with the revival of ancient rituals and teachings, modern man also benefits from the teaching of dying before dying. This is one of the most profound experiences in personal development, meditation, and mystical teachings. Now, contemporary individuals are going through processes of psychological death and spiritual transformation, not physical death as in ancient times. This is a modern version of the ancient teaching. For example, in the practice of yoga, one steps towards mental death with one's breath. In meditation, one sheds one's inner identity. These practices are practices of mental dissociation and allow one to let go of one's ego, fears, and desires. Initiatic death, once a ritual practiced only in temples, today has the potential to be a spiritual journey for every individual. These ancient teachings remind us that death is not just a physical event, but a spiritual rebirth. Dying before dying is not only a release from old selves, but also the first step on the path to becoming a being that integrates with the universe. In the light of this ancient teaching, then, we too can experience an inner transformation,